Okay, hi again. We're going to be talking about radio. We're kind of going somewhat from the earliest days of mass media to the present day. Radio is about 100 years old. It's really the first electronic mass medium that we have. It preceded television, of course. And so we're going to talk a bit here about radio. And we'll start out by talking about the present day of radio, which is still very much with us. Radio listening does remain high. About 90% of Americans have listened in the past week. Let's have a look at some statistics on that. Some interesting items here to look at. And we'll scroll down a bit, and we can see that about 92% of us listen to AM or FM radio over the airwaves. So we're, for the moment anyway, we're not including streaming radio and podcasts and so forth, but we're going to talk about those things. And that 92% is higher than TV viewership at 87%. Remember that people are more likely to listen to radio in their cars, and you really can't watch TV while you're in your car, especially if you're driving. So that's a little surprising, but I guess understandable too. Only 54% use a PC, which is not that surprising because the desktop computer is not as popular as it once was. 81% smartphone use, 46% tablet use, but 92% of people listening to traditional AM or FM radio, I believe that's weekly, still pretty impressive. So radio still very much a part of the media picture, and radio still very valuable in an emergency. There are times when communications just are not possible in the sorts of ways that we have become familiar with because of an emergency, because of some kind of catastrophe. But radio, broadcasting over the airwaves, and then also radio receivers can be battery operated, don't require electricity. So radio can be very valuable in an emergency. I'm going to show you a story here. And actually, I'm going to play you a radio story, which is interesting. This is from a public radio station in California, KQED. And the story here is not about themselves. They're not beating their own chest here. They're telling a story about another radio station in that area that was helpful to people when they had some very terrible wildfires out there recently, and people were able to keep up with what was going on because of radio.
From KQED.
Many are giving shout-outs and praise to emergency officials for the way they communicated evacuation orders, health advisories, and other information when the Kincaid fire started. Along with mobile phone and social media alerts, KQED Science reporter Danielle Vinton says 100-year-old technology got the word out in a big way.
When fire struck again in Tammy Scharf's home county of Sonoma, she knew what to do.
I really just right away go to KSRO.
News Talk KSRO is one Sonoma County radio station that offered rolling news coverage during this and the 2017 fires. Scharf kept the radio on even at night, eager to listen to one calming voice.
I think I heard the first broadcast when she came on, and I just felt like, okay, we're going to be okay because she's going to get us through this.
She is KSRO News Director Pat Kerrigan.
And let's get right to the specifics of the new information coming out this morning from CAL FIRE.
For people whose lives depended on evacuation orders and other emergency information, local radio delivers. Kerrigan says radio also connects with an audience in a way websites, newspapers, and TV can't.
It is very personal, very personal. You know, we're describing what's happening in our own voices, and our own voices naturally will be tinged with concern and fear and things like that.
Even if she's reaching hundreds of thousands of people, it can feel like a radio host is speaking directly to you.
Okay, and that is something that is important in radio that we try to perform, try to present ourselves in radio as if we are speaking to one person, not to thousands of people or hundreds of thousands or millions of people, but to one person. So that personal aspect is very important, and radio is very valuable as a communications tool in an emergency when other forms of media may not operate as efficiently. HD radio is something that is relatively new. It is provided by the traditional AM and FM stations, and like all traditional, as it's called, terrestrial radio broadcasting, it is free. You must have an HD radio receiver. Most people don't have those in their homes, but they may very well have them in a car, because the newer cars very often are equipped with an HD radio receiver. You may not even be aware of that. HD radio provides multiple channels for each station, so there might be actually 3 different radio signals emanating from one particular radio station with different types of programming. And also HD radio provides very, very high quality audio, better than FM radio, comparable to digital audio. So here's a bit of a video. We won't look at the whole thing, but we'll look at some of the beginning of the video here, having to do with several different up-to-date forms of audio technology, but in particular here, HD radio.
AM and FM radio technology remained virtually unchanged for decades.
Until HD radio revolutionized broadcast radio, bringing you the latest digital advances. Integrated in millions of cars across most makes and models, HD radio is broadcast from thousands of stations throughout North America.
With incredible audio quality, more content choices, and no subscription fees, it will completely redefine your AM and FM listening experience.
It's easy. Just tune to your favorite radio station, like you've always done. But thanks to its unique digital signal, HD radio delivers crystal clear audio without any static or hiss. It ensures the signal you receive is crisp and clear. Once you experience the sound quality of HD radio, you'll never want to go back to standard radio. HD radio utilizes the digital stream to provide you with useful info like song and artist names, detailed station information, and album art, giving you an enhanced multimedia experience.
But that's just the beginning. Each HD radio station can carry up to 3 additional channels. These extra channels will dramatically expand your listening options with fresh local content. You'll get more sports, more talk, and more music.
So you can see here HD1, HD2, HD3. Each of those would be coming from one single radio station, but it would be different programming on each of those. So that's a major aspect of HD radio, which again is relatively new. It's been around a few years, but still relatively new. Satellite radio exists separately from traditional AM and FM radio broadcasting. Satellite radio signals are broadcast nationwide, so if you have a satellite station that you like, you can hear it anywhere you go in the country. The service is primarily intended for occupants of motor vehicles, although there are apps that will allow you to listen in your home. It is available by subscription, so you pay for satellite radio. You pay a monthly fee, similar to what you would do for cable television or for internet service. And it is mostly commercial free because it is a subscription service and you pay for it. Then for the most part, except for the news-oriented stations, it is commercial free and offers subscribers more stations and a wider variety of programming options than in terrestrial radio. There's all kinds of specialty rock formats and all kinds of specialty music formats in general. In the U.S., we're mainly talking here about Sirius XM, a company called Sirius XM. So let's have a look at this on satellite radio.
Stream live and on-demand TV, now including these favorites. YouTube TV. Try it free.
This local access message is brought to you by Uber Eats.
With all the buzz and headlines and trend lines, you would think it's all podcasts and pure play streaming in car these days. But in fact, the numbers tell us that is still a long way from the truth. Here are all the new tricks radio's using to stay king of the road. Still, among younger drivers or in younger model year cars or at the junction of the two, there's still a significant growth rate, of course, around podcasts and pure play streaming. So SiriusXM finds itself in an interesting position. The former disruptor is now at risk of being disrupted. So their answer to that is something called SiriusXM 360L. It rolls in the satellite radio content like it always has, but also on-demand content, streams, and back catalog material, not just what's live on the satellite channels at a given moment. That's a new thing for SiriusXM. Some more tricks. If you go to the sports button over here, you can check out live sports. And also, if you go to the play-by-play screens, you can find your favorite teams. And when you're listening to a broadcast, you'll actually see graphics of the current play-by-play stats, kind of like on one of those web streams. Under many stations, you can also go to a new feature here, this little bell called Notify. If it's applicable on that station, you can be notified of other content of that type as it airs on any of the stations or channels on satellite radio. That's a nice way to be scanning it all the time and not you having to be turning the knob all the time and saying, I wonder if it's playing over here. This will let you know.
Okay, I'm going to pause that there. It goes on for a bit longer. You can watch some more of that if you like to, but that's sort of an update on how satellite radio is operating, and they've had some changes in technology and some improvements in technology, making it more personal and specialized for each individual listener. So again, satellite radio is something that you pay for. You pay a subscription, and a lot of the rules that apply then to traditional AM and FM radio, which are licensed by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, do not apply to satellite radio. Podcasting, a lot of you are fans of podcasting. The word podcasting comes from iPod. I don't know how many people are using iPods these days, but and then also the word broadcast, which still refers to over-the-air traditional broadcasting. And a podcast is an episodic series of digital audio files which a user can download, and then podcasting often does use a subscription model rather than advertising, or it may include advertising, also depending on the podcast. But if you're willing to pay a subscription fee, then advertising may not be necessary. The most popular podcast producers around the country, and podcasting has been around, starting in a big way around 2010, thereabouts. NPR, National Public Radio, is the most popular U.S. podcast producer, and NPR provides programming for FM, mostly radio stations, but broadcast traditional radio stations almost entirely on the FM band, and they still do that and have done that now for a long time, going back to the mid-'70s. But they have also become very powerful, very strong in podcasting. As you can see there, they have almost 18 million people, unique individuals. So 18 million people who listen at least once during the month to 47 shows, which relatively speaking, compared to some of the other producers, they're not that many. iHeartRadio, for example, is number 2. They have 157 active shows and nearly 15 million listeners divided among those 157 shows. So NPR really pretty extraordinary there with nearly 18 million regular listeners. New York Times, you see, there's a newspaper that is a podcast producer, and they're number 4. Some others, Barstool Sports, you may have heard of, and ESPN, of course. So a lot of these are familiar names. Others are not so familiar names, possibly to you. So podcasting, some people imagine that they might have their own podcast, and well, they might. There's not much to prevent you from doing that. Now, whether it's a profitable thing and something that will generate income is another question. But let's watch here a video, briefly anyway, on how to get started in podcasting.
All right, so you want a podcast, but you don't know how to get started? This video is going to show you just how simple it is to get your podcast going. Specifically, we'll look at 1, gear needed to set up a solo podcast. 2, gear needed to set up a podcast with 2 or more people. 3, audio software for editing your podcast. 4, quick tips and best practices for getting your podcast to sound as good as possible. 5, how to get your podcast out to the world. Now, one more thing. While lots of podcasts do incorporate video, today we're going to be focusing on the traditional audio-only podcast. So let's get to it. If you're going to do a podcast by yourself, then you're going to need a few pieces of gear. Of all the components of any podcasting setup, the microphone is the most important because it's responsible for how your voice sounds. In podcasting, we normally choose between 3 types of mics. USB mics, which are digital, or dynamic and condenser mics, which are analog. We definitely will get into the specific differences between these later, but I will tell you right now that if you're in search of the easiest solo podcast setup, the USB mic is the way to go, and here's why. USB mics employ a simple plug-and-play approach. You just plug it into your computer or your smartphone or tablet if you have the right adapters, record to whichever app or software you're using, listen through your headphones, and that's it. Let me show you an example.
I'm going to pause him there. He's going to go on. This is an 11-minute video, and I'm not going to take all that time to play all this. If you're interested, and you might very well be, you can watch the rest of this. There's quite a bit to take into account in terms of planning and producing your own podcast, but it is certainly a doable thing. Now, there are podcasts that are done in a professional sort of way, and then there are podcasts that are not. But it is certainly something that is not out of the question that you might do. Then streaming radio is a digital audio service transmitted via the internet. Internet radio involves streaming media, presenting listeners with a continuous stream of audio that typically cannot be paused or replayed, although there are some technical features that will let you pause and replay presumably live audio now, but for the most part, by and large, it is more like a traditional broadcast station. It's continuous. It's going presumably 24 hours a day, and it operates. Streaming radio would operate more like a regular AM and FM radio station would, compared to podcasting, which is entirely on demand. So an example of a streaming radio station is one I listen to a lot. It's the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, Radio 2. And last time I looked, the Radio 2 from the BBC was the most listened to radio station in the world. It's very, very good. We're just going to listen in to them, whatever they happen to be doing right now. Again, it's continuous. Broadcasting all of the time, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The audio will come in here in a moment. And they have different types of programs at any given time. You see, this is the Blues Show with Sarah Matthews. We'll bring up the audio here a little bit.
I ain't got nobody. Tell my girls to. Well, I ain't got nobody. Tell my girls to. Well, I don't know what's going to happen.
So this is a radio station. It's primarily an oldies station, but with a lot of conversation, a lot of talk, and not in the news vein, but just kind of just general talk that you might find entertaining and fun to listen to. But in the evening, then they do some specialized shows like this, the Blues Show, and then Trevor Nelson's Rhythm Nation will be next. And they come in with a newscast once an hour. It's just generally very pleasant listening. And of course, this is coming as we listen to it live from Great Britain. And you can listen to stations all over the world like that at any time. Pandora, you're probably familiar with as streaming radio, which is something like a radio station that you create for yourself in terms of the playlist of music that you enjoy. We'll have a look at a video on Pandora here, and there's others, of course, similar to it.
Did you even know this? Congress gives middle-class homeowners who haven't missed a mortgage payment in 6 months a generous mortgage.
Greets us by name and makes eerily appropriate By now, most of us are no longer freaked out by the way Amazon greets us by name and makes eerily appropriate product suggestions as soon as we land on its virtual doorstep. An extrapolation of that tech was my favorite sequence in Steven Spielberg's Minority Report.
John Anderson, you can use a Guinness right about now.
The recommendation engines of Amazon and other websites utilize the vast amount of data they have on their customers' shopping habits.
It's essentially looking at the book through statistics, stepping back, not knowing anything but the intrinsic qualities of that particular book or car or magazine or whatever.
Tim Westergren is founder and chief strategy officer of Pandora, a personalized web-based radio service.
It's a profoundly simple application. You just type in a song or artist and it creates a station, starts streaming. If you want to, you can kind of thumb up, thumb down, and you can create up to 100 of those, and they'll travel with you no matter where you are, what device you listen to.
It really is that simple to use. But what you can't see, under the hood, is that they've developed a unique approach to music recommendation. And it's not based on related purchases, but on the musical characteristics of songs.
I'm going to pause that. At that point, you can listen more to that, and it's very interesting how they do it. But basically, by indicating what particular songs you like, they will create a playlist, a continuous playlist of songs that are similar to that. That you'll enjoy listening to, and you can either pay for that service and not have commercials. You can subscribe to it, or you can say, no thanks, I don't mind hearing a commercial every 10 minutes or so, and then you can listen to it free in that way. So we'll leave it at that. That's kind of a modern day overview of radio, and we're going to get into some of the history of radio and how things got to be as they are today, and why they are the way they are today next time. So I thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.